My neighbor put up a $50,000 cent fence to swipe my ranch. So I turned her shiny new gate into a toll road that charges her $500 every month just to drive off her own property. Denise Parker blocked the dirt road my great-grandfather carved out in 1947, thinking she could bully me into selling 200 acres to her developer buddies for pennies on the dollar. Huge miscalculation. What Denise didn't realize was that the easement she was blocking wasn't just a right-of-way. I own every inch of soil under that road, and Texas law has this gorgeous little clause about private toll roads. Monday morning, 6 a.m. diesel fumes, low fog, and the smell of payback hitting harder than my coffee. There's Denise in silk pajamas, grinning like a cat that stole the cream, talking about how her new security gate was for everyone's safety. The look on her face when I installed my own toll booth, absolutely priceless. What would you do if your HOA tried to take your family's land? Drop your location and craziest neighbor war story below. Mine wraps up with handcuffs and a very profitable little enterprise. My name's Luke Callahan, and I'm the third generation to work this 200-acre cattle ranch just outside Austin. My grandfather homesteaded this place in 1947 when it was nothing but mesquite and rattlesnakes. He scraped that dirt road into existence with a mule team in pure Texas hard-headedness. I took over the ranch 15 years back, and believe me, cattle alone don't exactly keep the lights on these days. So I run an electrical contracting business during the week to literally and figuratively keep the power going. My daughter Lily, she's 16 now, shows prize-winning cattle through 4. That kid has more backbone than most grown men I've ever met. We've been a team ever since her mom died in a car wreck 3 years ago. Cancer would have been easier to fight than black ice on Highway 35. The ranch sits at the end of a dirt road that cuts across what used to be the Harper family's cotton field. About 5 years ago, some big-talking developer bought that land and turned it into Sage Ridge Estates, one of those cookie-cutter subdivisions where every house looks like it came out of the same catalog order form. McMansions with 3-car garages and lawns so perfect they might as well be AstroTurf. That's where Denise Parker enters the picture. 52 years old, pharmaceutical sales executive, moved down from Dallas 2 years back in a white BMW with vanity plates that read DN Park 1. Real subtle, right? She's married to Grant, this timid little attorney who apparently learned conflict resolution by watching ostriches stick their heads in the sand. She got herself elected HOA president by running on a platform of property values and security, which in Denise speak means making everyone else's life as difficult as possible. Their place sits right where my access road crosses into the subdivision. $800,000 worth of beige stucco and prefab charm with a view of my cattle pasture that Denise apparently finds visually offensive. So there I was that Monday morning, staring at this fence that popped up overnight like some kind of spite-fueled magic trick. The smell of creosote from those posts mixed with Denise's overpowering perfume, the kind that's probably doing its best to cover up 2 packs a day. The metallic of that electronic gate mechanism sounded like a prison door slamming shut. Denise handed me this 47-page access agreement with all the enthusiasm of a cat dropping a dead mouse on your porch. $500 a month plus insurance plus road maintenance costs, liability concerns, she said. Property aesthetics. Now, I may make my living with my hands, but I'm no fool. That road was there a good 60 years before her precious subdivision ever existed. It's recorded as an easement in the county records, which means I have every legal right to use it. I tried to explain that to Denise as politely as humanly possible. Her comeback? I'll call the sheriff for trespassing. And wouldn't you know it, Deputy Harris rolls up about 20 minutes later. Turns out he's Denise's golf buddy at the country club. Real convenient arrangement. He suggests I try to work something out with the HOA. You know, keep the peace. But here's what really lit my fuse. Lily's prize heifer, Daisy, needed the vet that morning. What used to be a 15-minute run to the clinic turned into a 45-minute detour all the way around the subdivision. When you've got a sick animal, every minute matters. Dust and diesel coated my tongue as I sat in my truck, looking at Denise's smug little smile. She figured she had me trapped. What she didn't realize was that she just picked a fight with somebody who learned property law the hard way by inheriting land developers have been trying to pry away from us for 3 generations. Here's your first legal nugget: prescriptive easements. When you've been using a road for decades, the law often protects your continued use. even when the land around it changes hands. Write that down, because it's about to become real important. By Wednesday, I had a harassment complaint with my name on it filed at the sheriff's office. Supposedly, my aggressive behavior and intimidating presence posed a threat to the peaceful residents of Sage Ridge Estates. The fact that I'd calmly asked about my legal rights somehow morphed into terroristic threatening in Denise's twisted mind. But that was just the opening act. She launched a neighborhood WhatsApp group called Safety First Sage Ridge. And let me tell you, the rumors in that chat would make the National Enquirer blush. According to Denise's version, I was an unstable widower with anger problems who let my cattle roam wild and probably had a meth lab in the barn. The creativity was almost impressive. She managed to rally 3 other HOA board members to her side, the kind of folks who think owning a boat makes them admirals and having a riding mower turns them into landscaping experts. Together, they voted to spend HOA funds on secure solutions security services for regular patrols. Nothing says we're terrified of one guy with a pickup like blowing community money on rent-a-cops. Now, I could have just taken it on the chin, but my grandfather didn't raise quitters. I hired a surveyor to mark the exact property lines and nail down that easement once and for all. Cost me $800 I really didn't have. But sometimes you've got to spend money to make a point. Ian Alls, the surveyor, showed up Friday morning with gear that beeped and chirped like R2-D2, having a panic attack with a smoke detector. Watching him work in the morning dew, taking exact measurements while Denise glared at us from her kitchen window, felt like watching science go to war with stupidity. And here's where things got interesting. This is the mini twist I mentioned. The survey showed that Denise's fancy, expensive fence wasn't just blocking my easement. It was actually sitting 3 feet into the public right-of-ways. The county has strict setback rules, and her fence blew past every one of them. I filed a complaint with county code enforcement faster than you could say property line violation. Nothing like using the bureaucracy on someone who thinks they're above the rules. Denise wasn't backing down without a fight. The next Tuesday, I get a certified letter from Porter Ames Cole. That's Grant's law firm in case you missed the family tie-in. A cease and desist, accusing me of harassing HOA officials and demanding I stop my supposed campaign of defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The letter was longer than most Stephen King novels and about twice as frightening, threatening to sue me for everything from harassment to interference with business relationships. Legal fees like that could easily cost me the ranch, and Denise knew it. This wasn't just about access anymore. It was about whether a working family could stand up to someone with more money and connections. That night, I sat at my kitchen table under the yellow glow of an old lamp, going through those legal papers with hands more used to gripping wire strippers than court filings. The smell of leather and hay drifted in from the barn, where I usually hide when life gets messy. But this time, running wasn't an option. Lily found me around midnight, still reading. That girl has built-in radar for when her dad's worried. "We're not giving up, are we?" she asked in this quiet, steady way that reminds me of her mom. "Not a chance," I told her. "Your great-grandfather built this place with his bare hands. We're not letting some wannabe queen bee take it away." The next morning brought support I hadn't expected. Henry and Marge Novak, married 50 years and tougher than boot leather, stopped by with coffee and sympathy. They'd watched the whole mess unfold from their place across the road. "Seen this kind of thing before?" Henry said, sipping coffee from a mug older than most cars. Developers and their pet HOAs trying to squeeze out the locals. Even the feed store owner mentioned other folks were having HOA issues. Turned out Denise's little kingdom of control was earning enemies faster than a politician in campaign season. Lily's advisor, Mrs. Turner, pulled me aside at the next meeting. "Document everything," she said. "Photos, recordings, witnesses. If this ends up in court, you'll need proof. Here's your second legal nugget. Always document harassment the moment it happens. Photos, recordings, written statements from witnesses. They all matter in front of a judge, and memories fade faster than old jeans. Get it in writing, get it dated, and stash copies somewhere safe." The sound of my boots on the porch that evening felt different, heavier somehow, like 3 generations worth of weight settling on my shoulders, but also more determined. Denise thought she could scare me off with lawyers and costs and fancy letterhead. She was about to learn that sometimes the best defense is a good offense, Texas style. Denise decided to go nuclear the following week. She called an emergency HOA meeting about what she labeled security threats from adjacent properties. I'm talking full-blown PowerPoint production, slides with photos of my aging ranch buildings that were supposedly visible from the subdivision and somehow dragging down property values. The woman had actually climbed onto her roof to snap aerial shots of my barn. I mean, seriously, who does that? She's up there in designer yoga pants with a telephoto lens like some kind of suburban spy satellite. Her big proposal was a so-called buffer zone that would require me to install privacy screening at my own cost. $20,000 worth of trees and shrubs to hide my working ranch from her fragile sense of aesthetics. And if I refused, she'd go after my insurance company directly for diminished property values. Now, I'm not exactly the type who usually shows up to HOA meetings. I'd honestly rather watch paint dry or do a full audit of my taxes. But this time was different. This time she'd crossed the line from irritating neighbor to someone actively threatening my family's livelihood. I walked into that meeting with Lily and Henry as witnesses, loaded with the surveyor's report and every scrap of historical documentation I could dig up. The community center smelled like stale coffee and cheap disinfectant, with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry hornets. 23 people jammed into a room built for maybe 15, folding chairs squeaking every time someone shifted. Denise stood at the front with her slideshow, dressed in a power suit that probably cost more than my truck payment. She clicked through pictures of my ranch like she was presenting evidence in a homicide trial. Property values, she kept repeating, safety concerns, community standards. When she wrapped up, I stood and calmly laid out my surveyor's report. I explained how the ranch had been there first, how the subdivision was built around already existing rights, and how her fence violated the county's setback rules. I even brought copies of the original 1947 homestead deed. Here's where the mini twist arrives. During the heated back and forth that followed, Denise got flustered and let something slip she definitely shouldn't have. She mentioned ongoing discussions with Summit Ridge Development about potential Phase 2 expansion opportunities. The room went dead quiet. See, Summit Ridge Development was the outfit that built Sage Ridge Estates, and Phase 2 expansion meant more houses in the pipeline. Guess whose 200-acre ranch would be ideal for that? Suddenly, this wasn't about neighbor spats or HOA policies anymore. This was about Denise trying to strong-arm me into selling by making my ranch unlivable. The fence wasn't about security. It was about economic warfare. Henry's weathered face broke into the kind of slow grin you see just before someone drops a bombshell. Funny thing about schemes, he said loud enough for everyone to hear, they tend to fall apart once people start talking. Residents started shifting in their chairs, uncomfortable. These weren't terrible folks, just people who had bought into Denise's narrative about protecting their investments. Now they were realizing they'd been used as pawns to attack a neighbor whose family had been there for 7 decades. Lily stood up in the middle of all that, and I've never been prouder. 16 years old, facing a room full of adults, and she spoke with more poise than most politicians. She talked about her great-grandfather's legacy, about learning responsibility through 4, about how the ranch taught her the value of hard work. This land isn't just property to us, she said, voice steady even with the tension in the room. It's where my great-grandfather proved that with enough stubbornness, you can build something that lasts. It's where my grandmother raised my dad to believe in doing right by your neighbors. It's where my mom taught me that family means fighting for what matters. The scratch of my pen on the legal pad as I took notes was suddenly the loudest sound in the room. You could practically hear Denise's blood pressure climbing as her carefully spun story unraveled. But the real game changer hit when Grant Parker visibly winced as his wife mentioned the developer talks. See, attorneys are supposed to disclose conflicts of interest. If Grant had financial dealings with Summit Ridge while representing the HOA, that was a serious problem. As we stepped out of that meeting, I understood I wasn't just dealing with a troublesome neighbor anymore. I was up against a coordinated plan to strip my family of our land through harassment and financial pressure. The fence wasn't just a nuisance, it was a weapon. Here's your third legal nugget: tortious interference. When someone intentionally sabotages your business relationships or tries to shove you into financial disaster for their own gain. That's not just nasty behavior. It's illegal. and the penalties can be steep. The cool night air hitting my face in the parking lot felt like freedom. Lily tucked her arm into mine, and Henry clapped me on the shoulder. "Son," he said, "you just turned this from a property squabble into a full-on war. Hope you're ready for what comes next." I was ready. More than ready. Time to show Denise Parker what happens when you come to her after a family that's been fighting to keep its land since before she was even born. Denise's reaction to being exposed was to double down in spectacular fashion. Within a week, she'd filed a formal complaint with the county claiming my cattle posed health hazards to the subdivision. According to her report, my championship Angus herd had somehow transformed into disease-ridden threats, endangering innocent families. But that wasn't even the lowest blow. She began sending anonymous letters to Lily's school, alleging unsafe living conditions and insisting I was an unfit parent. My 16-year-old daughter came home in tears after being pulled aside by the guidance counselor for questioning about her home life. Seeing that kind of fear on her face made something inside me break. I had never wanted to throttle someone more than I did that moment. Then Denise went after my income. Using her HOA connections, she started calling my electrical contracting clients, suggesting they reconsider hiring someone embroiled in legal turmoil. I lost 3 jobs that week, including a $15,000 commercial project I'd been counting on to cover Lily's upcoming college application costs. And then she launched the social media campaign. She created a Facebook group called Concerned Citizens of Sage Ridge and filled it with photos of my cattle, claiming they were dangerous livestock operations too close to families. Never mind that these same animals had grazed peacefully for decades, or that Lily's 4 projects had won multiple county awards. Denise knew exactly what she was doing. It was time to bring in real firepower. I hired Isabel Torres, an attorney specializing in agricultural law and rural property rights. Cost me $5,000 I didn't have, but sometimes survival requires sacrifice. Isabel flipped through my documentation with the grin of someone who just smelled blood in the water. "This isn't harassment," she said, spreading the evidence across her conference table. "This is systematic intimidation designed to force a property sale. We can use this." She filed a counter-complaint for intentional interference with business relationships. And that's when things really blew open. See, once you sue someone, you get access to discovery. That means you can force them to turn over documents and answer questions under oath. And boy, did we discover things. For starters, Denise owed $47,000 in back taxes. Suddenly, her desperation to inflate property values made perfect sense. But the motherlode came when we uncovered that she'd used HOA funds to finance her fence. $23,000 of community money spent on what amounted to a personal vendetta. That's embezzlement, plain and simple, and carries real criminal consequences. Isabel dug deeper and found a pattern. Denise had lived in 3 other subdivisions across Texas over the past decade, and in every single one she'd been involved in similar disputes with rural neighbors. Same playbook each time: harassment, legal threats, suspicious developer connections, forced sales. The tide started shifting when the local newspaper picked up the story. A reporter named Adrian Wells had been covering HOA abuse cases statewide, and our situation was the perfect addition to his series. David versus Goliath stories sell, he told me over diner coffee, especially when Goliath is corrupt. Then more victims stepped forward. A retired teacher whose vegetable garden had been declared a public nuisance. A disabled veteran whose service dog was banned from HOA areas. An elderly couple forced to remove a memorial garden because it violated landscaping symmetry standards. The Ranchers Association even offered legal fund support. Turns out rural Texas takes protecting agricultural land very seriously. But the biggest shock came from inside Denise's own home. Grant showed up at my door one evening, looking like a man who had been carrying secrets that were eroding him from the inside. He handed me a manila envelope and said, "I can't watch this anymore." Inside were 2 years' worth of HOA financial records. Every questionable transaction, every suspicious expense, every breach of fiduciary duty laid out in excruciating detail. Grant might have been timid, but the guy kept impeccable records. "She's been skimming money for months," he muttered. "The fence was just the biggest one. There's more." Lily's 4 Group launched a Save Our Ranches awareness campaign with shirts and bumper stickers. That girl transformed into a social media strategist overnight, posting videos about ranch heritage and property rights that started gaining traction fast. But the emotional drain was getting heavy. I found her crying over messages from classmates whose parents had swallowed Denise's lies. She was losing friends, getting side-eye at school, forced to carry stress no teenager should have to handle. Henry stopped by that evening and found me staring at a letter from a real estate company offering to buy the ranch for fair market value. He asked if I was considering it. For about 5 seconds, I admitted. Then I remembered my wife's wish for Lily to inherit this land someday. Good, Henry said, because I have a feeling your troubles are about to become Denise's. The next morning, Isabel called with news that changed everything. She'd been digging through the original property records, all the way back to 1947, when she found something that made her yell out loud in the courthouse archives. Luke, she said, barely containing excitement, sit down. Turns out the access road wasn't just an easement. I owned it, every inch of land beneath it. A surveyor's mistake decades ago meant the developers had assumed the road was public when it was actually part of the original deed. That meant Denise's fence wasn't just blocking me, it was sitting on my private property. She was trespassing, and she'd spent 50 grand building a fence on land I legally owned. But it got even better. Isabel dug into Grant's documents and uncovered the deeper conspiracy. Summit Ridge Development had promised Denise a $200,000 finder's fee if she secured my property. The other HOA board members had their own side deals with the developers. We were now talking potential criminal charges, mail fraud for the fake legal notices sent through the postal system, wire fraud for electronic communications outlining their plan, and if coordination could be proven, RICO violations. That's the stuff used to prosecute organized crime. Even a county commissioner had accepted campaign contributions from Summit Ridge. Corruption was woven deep into this situation. That's when Isabel proposed something so wild it bordered on brilliant. If you own the road, she said, you control who uses it, including charging access fees. The irony was perfect. Denise had built an entire gate system that we could use for our own toll operation. Instead of fighting the fence, we could turn it into revenue. Is that even legal? I asked. Completely, Isabel replied. Private road owners can charge reasonable usage fees. There's plenty of precedent. That night I sat out on the porch with Lily, watching the Texas sunset stretch gold and purple across the pasture. The hum of distant AC units from the subdivision mixed with the soft lowing of cattle settling in for the evening. Dad, she asked, are we really going to charge people to use our road? I told her we were going to charge them exactly what Denise planned to charge us, $500 a month plus maintenance. Lily laughed, a real laugh, the first one I'd heard from her in weeks. That's beautifully evil, she said. Right then, Henry wandered over with a beer and plopped into his usual chair. When I told him about Isabel's discovery, he just nodded like he'd seen it coming all along. Your great-granddad was a smart man, he said. Always told me he bought every inch of land fair and square. Looks like he kept better records than the county. The next morning, I drove out to visit my wife's grave and tell her about the plan. Sounds crazy, I know, but I needed to speak it out loud. We'd fought so hard to hold on to this place, and now we had a real chance not just to save it, but to turn the whole situation into something profitable. Wish you could see Lily, I told the headstone. She's got your fight and my stubborn streak. This Denise woman picked the wrong family. Here's your knowledge nugget. Adverse possession works both ways. When someone uses your land without right, you can reclaim it, and sometimes even collect damages. In other words, the best defense can absolutely be a profitable offense. Building a toll system sounded like a huge undertaking, but with the right people, it came together surprisingly fast. Turns out Henry wasn't just a tough old rancher. He was the county surveyor for 30 years before retiring. His wife Marge spent 4 decades teaching elementary school and had the kind of organizational skill that could whip the military into shape. My buddy Marcus from the electrical trade was all in the moment he heard the plan. Solar-powered toll booth with license plate recognition? Dude, we're building the future. Even Grant got involved quietly, feeding us inside information. When your wife is committing federal crimes using your law firm's stationery, it tends to inspire quiet rebellion. First step was legal structure. Isabel helped me file paperwork for High Prairie Access Solutions, LLC, a company that would own and operate the toll road. That layer of liability protection meant even if Denise tried another lawsuit, my personal assets and the ranch would be safe. County permits took 2 weeks and cost just under $900. But we got approval to run a commercial private road with electronic toll collection. The irony was beautiful. Denise's own gate post became the foundation for our toll booth. Nothing sweeter than turning your enemy's weapon into your business infrastructure. Marcus designed a system that would make NASA grin. Solar panels to run everything, high-resolution digital cameras, automatic plate recognition, encrypted data storage, and battery backup, strong enough to run 2 weeks without sunshine. We matched our fees to Denise's original demands, $25 a month for residents or $5 per trip for occasional users. Marge researched similar private roads across Texas and declared our rates fair and reasonable. In Marge speak, that meant legally airtight. The community response was incredible. Local ranchers dropped off materials faster than we could use them. Steel posts, lumber, concrete bags. It felt like a modern-day barn raising, except instead of stacking hay, we were building justice. The feed store lent us equipment. Neighboring ranch families brought meals. Everyone wanted to help someone stand up to HOA bullies. Meanwhile, Lily became our social media force. She launched a TikTok account called Ranch Girl Rights and started documenting the entire process. Her videos about rural heritage, property rights, and small-town grit blew up, views climbing by the tens of thousands. Adrian, the reporter, practically embedded himself at the ranch. He documented our fight like it was a frontline conflict, because honestly, it kind of was. Having media eyes on us meant Denise couldn't pull her usual stunts without witnesses. Isabel filed our lawsuit against Summit Ridge Development for conspiracy and fraud, while simultaneously submitting criminal referrals to the district attorney for HOA embezzlement and to the FBI for potential mail fraud and racketeering. The psychological warfare might have been the best part. I posted the legally required notice of upcoming toll operations at the subdivision entrance. Panic spread through Sage Ridge like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone wanted emergency HOA meetings. Residents who'd once glared at me across property lines were now demanding answers from Denise. That's when Grant cracked and exposed her secret developer payouts right in front of half the neighborhood. You could practically hear reputations exploding. Construction kicked into high gear. Marcus's solar framework went up with military precision. Henry supervised road grading like a foreman from the 1960s. Marge coordinated volunteers with color-coded lists that would have made NASA engineers proud. Lily documented everything: daytime work, evening planning meetings, even Henry giving old-school surveying lessons. The whole place buzzed with energy. By the end of the month, we had a fully functional, high-tech toll system that honestly looked more professional than half the state-run setups. Lily's TikTok account soared past 50,000 followers. Grant had developed enough backbone to stand up to Denise, and Henry surveyed the finished booth with that slow nod of approval he reserved for only the finest craftsmanship. "Your great-granddad would be proud," he said, "taking something meant to hurt you and turning it into something that pays the bills." That's real Texas thinking. And when we ran our first successful test transaction, the electronic beep was the sweetest sound I've ever heard. Denise's fence of intimidation had officially become our gateway to financial freedom. Denise's retaliation reached new levels of ridiculous. First, she filed bogus safety complaints with OSHA, claiming our crew was operating without proper protocols. When the inspector arrived, he found our work exceeded every standard and even complimented Marcus on the solar layout. Next, she tried bribing the county electrical inspector to fail our permits. $500 slipped into an envelope. The whole thing was caught on his body cam, which led to a very uncomfortable meeting with internal affairs. Nothing screams, "I'm losing," quite like attempting to bribe an official. Then came the protesters. Denise actually hired 20 people to march around holding signs like "Stop Toll Tyranny" and "Protect Property Values." Half of them had Louisiana license plates, and most couldn't pronounce Sage Ridge correctly. But the real showstopper came when our security cameras caught Denise sneaking onto the construction site at 2 a.m, dressed head to toe in black like some suburban ninja. She tried to dump sugar into the concrete mixer engine. Unfortunately for her, she tripped over a wheelbarrow in the dark and face-planted into fresh concrete. The footage of her flailing, covered in gray sludge, became Lily's biggest TikTok hit, over 3 million views. She had to call 911 to get unstuck, and explaining to paramedics why she was trespassing in a ski mask during July was a comedy masterpiece. The fire chief was laughing too hard to even operate the hose. Her husband, Grant, tried filing an emergency injunction to halt our progress, claiming we were violating public access. Huge mistake. Dragging a judge into your family meltdown rarely ends well. Not only did the judge deny the injunction, he ordered Denise to pay our legal fees. The state bar also opened an ethics investigation into Grant for filing frivolous claims and allowing personal conflicts to influence legal actions. Using the court system for personal revenge tends to end careers fast. Meanwhile, public opinion turned so sharply in our favor, it could have given whiplash. 3 HOA board members resigned rather than be connected to Denise's spiraling chaos. Local businesses started offering toll road crew discounts, turning our project into a community symbol of standing up to bullies. Regional news picked up the story, and suddenly we had reporters asking for interviews about small-town Texas toll justice. Lily handled the interviews like she'd been doing it her whole life, explaining property rights and rural heritage more clearly than adults twice her age. Instead of pressing criminal charges for the sabotage, I made Denise an offer: community service with Lily's 4-H group or face prosecution. The psychological sting of working alongside the very people she'd been attacking? Priceless. But Denise's problems were multiplying faster than fire ants in August. Her tax issues became public record when the newspaper pulled financial documents. A foreclosure notice soon appeared on her front door, photographed gleefully by neighbors and posted across social media. Denise marched to Summit Ridge demanding her payment for consulting services, only to have them cut ties the moment the FBI opened an investigation. Our toll system had a few suspicious malfunctions during week 1. Turned out Denise had hired a local 14-year-old to hack our cameras for $50. His parents dragged him over to apologize. Mortified. Smart kid, though. I ended up hiring him as a part-time tech helper. Nothing like turning your enemy's sabotage into a recruitment opportunity. The best part? Our toll road was profitable right out of the gate. First week revenue hit $2,800 from residents choosing monthly passes over the hassle of detours. Lily ran our payment portal and customer support like a pro. News helicopters flew overhead daily, mixed with the rhythmic beeping of toll transactions and Denise's audible meltdowns across the street. "Dad," Lily said one evening as we watched the sunset from the booth, "I think we broke her." "Nah," I said, watching Denise pace in frantic circles on our lawn. "She broke herself. We just provided the tools." But Denise wasn't done imploding. She filed a complaint with the Department of Agriculture claiming my cattle were spreading some unnamed illness. The state veterinarian inspected the herd and declared them healthier than most show animals and complimented our vaccination program. Then came environmental accusations. She claimed we violated wetland protection laws. The inspector from the state spent 10 minutes on site before laughing outright. The nearest wetland was 15 miles away. Next, she went for the nuclear option, my family. She filed reports with Child Protective Services claiming Lily was around dangerous machinery and an unsafe home environment. The CPS worker arrived, saw our safety setup, saw Lily's confidence and stability, and closed the case immediately. She even hinted that filing false reports could trigger consequences, something Denise clearly didn't consider. Denise then reported me to the IRS, claiming tax fraud. Joke was on her. I've always kept immaculate records because the ranch barely turned a profit. The IRS ended their audit with a letter praising my bookkeeping. Meanwhile, our toll road earnings rose steadily. First month revenue hit $12,000. Residents who once sided with Denise now thanked us for having a well-lit, well-maintained road. The story went national. Lily's TikTok account passed 500,000 followers. Corporations reached out with sponsorship offers. Denise, had a very public meltdown in the grocery store, screaming at me in front of a dozen witnesses. The video went viral across platforms, and her pharmaceutical company placed her on administrative leave. Her children publicly distanced themselves online. Grant finally filed for separation, citing ongoing criminal behavior. He moved out, leaving Denise with a mortgage she couldn't pay. He cooperated fully with investigators, providing every incriminating record he had saved. The FBI visited Denise multiple times, each meeting lasting longer and looking grimmer. They were clearly building charges. Residents of Sage Ridge threw their first ever block party to celebrate the new HOA board and formally apologize to my family. Property values actually increased from the positive publicity. The subdivision went from a battleground to a model community, with good governance for once. Our toll road success drew attention from the Texas Department of Transportation, who began studying our model for potential rural infrastructure solutions. Lily talked seriously about studying engineering and business. We hired 2 part-time employees for maintenance and admin work. The FBI, meanwhile, kept their cadence of visits to Denise's house, each one leaving her more frantic. One night, Lily asked, "Do you think she'll do something really crazy?" I looked across the road at Denise's house, every light glowing at 2 a.m., silhouettes pacing behind the blinds. "Honestly," I said, "I think she already has. Now we're just waiting for the consequences to land." By the time the county commission meeting rolled around, the drama had outgrown the small chambers. 237 people packed into the room, shoulder to shoulder. 5 news crews, reporters everywhere, FBI agents in the back. The agenda item was public comment on private road access and HOA governance, but everyone knew what it really was: the public dismantling of Denise Parker. And she requested the meeting. She showed up in an expensive suit, hands shaking, voice far too high. She accused me of extortion, harassment, infrastructure terrorism, and demanded the county shut down the toll road immediately. When she finished her speech, the room was so silent you could hear someone breathe across the aisle. Then Isabel stepped up. What followed was a devastating legal takedown. Email chains, financial records, fence invoices paid illegally with HOA funds, developer bribes, recorded calls, HOA embezzlement, every lie, every scheme, every criminal act displayed on giant screens around the room. Then Lily walked to the podium, 16 years old, speaking like a seasoned advocate. She told the story of our family, the ranch, the legacy we were protecting, and how the community had shown her courage in the face of corruption. She announced she had earned a full scholarship to study agricultural law at Texas A&M. The room erupted into applause. Then Henry got up with the original 1947 surveyor drawings. He revealed the final twist. My great-grandfather hadn't just owned the road. He owned 50 more acres than previously believed, including land Summit Ridge was already marketing for Phase 2 development. That was federal-level fraud. At that moment, an FBI agent approached Denise, read her rights, and cuffed her right there in front of the cameras. The room gave a standing ovation. In the months that followed, everything changed. Denise got 18 months in federal prison, plus probation and restitution. Her home was foreclosed. Her career ended. Meanwhile, we expanded our toll road business across Texas, created jobs, and helped other ranch families protect their land. Lily thrived at A&M, managing our growing online presence and planning our future law firm, Callahan. Our story became a statewide legislative catalyst. Callahan's law passed unanimously, protecting rural property access rights. 12 other states introduced similar bills. Even the Supreme Court cited our case. Sage Ridge became a healthy, happy neighborhood. They built a monument honoring the ranch families who came before. Our scholarship fund grew, helping rural kids afford college. The county partnered with us to preserve 500 acres of ranch land for future generations. And every Sunday, I visit my wife's grave and tell her the updates. How Lily is thriving, how our land is safe, and how justice, when fought for with grit and truth, can ripple out further than anyone expects. Sometimes the best thing you can do to a bully is turn their attack into your opportunity.